Hello everybody, welcome to White Wanderer. I'm Jack. Just a short video for you this week, but nonetheless I hope you find it interesting. Today then you join me in Merston, which is a small village located 4 miles southeast of Newport. And naturally I am here today because of a long lost railway station. Now this is what remains of Merstone Station, the island platform, which despite being slightly overgrown on that side is in remarkable condition and has been preserved to some extent, which is amazing given that it last saw a train in 1956.
Merston suffered from the most common of drawbacks when it comes to Isle of Wight stations: remoteness. But despite this, it was also at one point an interchange serving 2 separate railways. The initial railway through Merston was built by the Isle of Wight Newport Junction Railway, opened in 1875, and is incidentally this year celebrating its 150-year anniversary. Well, kind of. It's complicated, but I'll go into that in another video. The second line to be served by Merston was the Newport Godshill St Lawrence Railway, known more commonly as the Ventnor West Line, which, although very pretty, was more or less one massive disaster. The last line to open in 1897 and the first one to close in 1952.
On the face of it then, that all seems pretty straightforward. The station here at Merston was opened by the Isle of Wight Newport Junction Railway in 1875, and then when the Ventnor West branch was constructed, it was converted into an interchange, plain and simple. But as always when it comes to Isle of Wight railway history, far from it, because Merston once upon a time had another station, one that in fact predates this one, and it is a bit of a mystery.
You see, unlike many of the other stations that are still visible on the former alignment of the Isle of Wight Newport Junction Railway, Merston as we see it today doesn't actually date back to 1875. In fact, it only dates back to 1895, built in anticipation of the opening of the Ventnor West Line, which means that for the first 2 decades of the railway's existence, Merston was served by another station on a different site. But where? Well, to find out, I've been scanning over some old OS maps of the period. And on this one, published in 1898, you can see Merston Station depicted as Merston Junction, exactly where you'd expect to find it on the western side of the level crossing. But if we jump back in time to the 1870s map, published before the Ventnor West Line was constructed, we notice something a little strange. The station is on the wrong side of the road.
Indeed it is, because the original location of Merston Station wasn't in fact here. It was here on the eastern side of the level crossing, about where these bungalows now stand. Now this may seem trivial, being a mere 50 metres from the later station, but in terms of historical significance, this one is very important indeed.
See, by the time the branch line opened in 1897, the Isle of Wight Newport Junction Railway as a company body didn't really exist anymore. In fact, by the end of the 1880s, they had already been incorporated into the Isle of Wight Central, a company which was basically an amalgamation of the Ryde Newport Railway, Cowes Newport Railway, and of course the Newport Junction. The Central also immediately taking over operations of the Ventnor West Line upon its completion. This then means that the visible platform remains we can still see today at Merston were built by the Isle of Wight Central. The location of this station being to the west of the road to allow the Ventnor West branch more headroom on approach to the interchange.
In essence, what it means is despite the proximity of these two stations to each other, they are in fact two entirely separate structures built by two separate railway companies. And for the entirety of the Isle of Wight and Newport Junction Railway's existence, this was the station at Merston, which arguably makes it more historically significant.
So what happened to it then? Well, it's difficult to say because information, as usual, is very sparse indeed. In fact, it isn't completely clear how it was constructed in the first place, be it timber or a more permanent structure. On the whole though, we can probably assume that it resembled something like the Newport Junction Railway Station at Newchurch. A very primitive and simple structure. But apart from that, there's not much to go on. Even the early OS maps which depict the station don't actually show the outline of the platform. Now this isn't unusual, many primitive maps of this period portrayed railway stations in the same vague way. But this doesn't aid us at all in identifying exactly where the platform was, or how long the structure would have been.
How about photographic evidence then? Can that enlighten us? Well, basically, no. See, photos of the Island Railway network that predate the 1900s do exist, but the fact of the matter is that the Isle of Wight Newport Junction Railway was very camera shy. Illustrations of the line during this primitive period are like gold dust, which you could argue actually adds to its mysteriousness and historical relevance. But who knows, maybe one day a photograph may come to light and reveal what the station actually looked like. With that then, thank you very much for watching. As always, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, we have plenty more on the channel to watch. We also now have a members club which you can sign up for extra content. I'll be back next Friday for your weekly dose of Wight Wanderer and Isle of Wight Railway history, but until then, all the best and enjoy the sunshine.